Welcome back to another episode of Important Miscellaneous Talks. I am your host, Crossfield. And today we have a very interesting guest with us here today, a man who hates plants. Can you imagine? We have him here with us today. Please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's nice to meet you both. My name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American physician, currently working in Australia in my neurosurgical residency, but I also have done quite extensive research into diet and nutrition and how that affects health and chronic disease, and have been applying that into my practice as well.
Got you. So, what sparked your interest in nutrition to begin with?
So I originally became interested just through my own for my own health and athletic performance. I was an All-American rugby player and I played at a professional level as well. And I was just always very interested in just giving my body the best fuel that it could have to be, an athlete. And I was also interested in medicine. I was studying biology and obviously, different prerequisites for medical school, very biology heavy. And so I was taking nutrition courses and just wanting to know exactly how the human body worked and was optimized by that. But I became more meat based. Well, I was always meat based. I always enjoyed meat. I always preferred meat, but I started eating exclusively meat about 23 years ago, my undergraduate degree, when I was taking cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle, and we learned how plants are living things. And they like to stay living things, and so all living things have a natural defense from animals and insects trying to eat them. And so while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they have to use other means. And one of those is by actually making toxins that are damaging and poisonous, or that strip nutrients out of your system, or screw with your hormones, or do other things of a deleterious nature to our bodies when you eat them. And we know this inherently, right? You get lost in the woods and you run out of food. You can't just eat any random plant in the woods. Most of them will make you very, very sick or even kill you. And that's true of spinach and mushrooms, just as true as it is of hemlock. It's just to a lesser degree. We have some defenses against some of these foods that we eat that protect us a bit more than others. So we were learning that from a cancer perspective, and we were just looking at carcinogens. So we learned that there were 136 known human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts, and that mushrooms, like just white cap mushrooms, had over 100. And then spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, like every plant you've
Whoa,
ever
whoa.
eaten.
I love all those things. I'm sorry,
I
continue.
know. I know. So that's the thing. These are all very commonly eaten foods, but they all had dozens of carcinogens identified in them, and they were actually more abundant than we think. There was a seminal paper written by Professor Bruce Ames of UC Berkeley, published in 1989, that actually showed that the naturally occurring toxins in vegetables outweigh the pesticides we spray on them by a factor of 10,000, and that
Wow.
and that the naturally occurring toxins in just mushrooms, like just white mushrooms, were 500 times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticide alar that they were studying and comparing it to at the time. So, this is why we still have pesticides, because they were tested against it. And, this is before like glyphosate and Roundup, all that sort of stuff. But at least the ones that they were testing at the time were much less toxic and much less abundant than just the toxins that are naturally occurring in plants. And so that was obviously shocking to us. I was blown away. I thought he must be joking. And I was looking around looking for someone who was just in on the joke, but no one was. And so it dawned on me that this got serious. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? Because that's, it's been drilled in our heads since forever. And he just sort of looked at us and he just said, yeah, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants
Mm.
trying to kill you. And so it's like, okay, let's just stop eating plants. And go to the grocery store. Everything has plants in it. Everything's based in plants, made out of plants, pastas, breads, salads, everything. Everything's made from plants. And so I just found some eggs and meat, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just eat these. And I defaulted into just a completely carnivorous diet just by default. And I never felt better. My athletic performance went through the roof. My health went through the roof. I got very lean, fit, strong, muscular, very, very easily. It was much easier to get in shape and stay in shape doing that. And I did that for a number of years. until I sort of slipped off of it. I didn't realize how significant it was what I was doing, and it wasn't until sort of 5, 6 years ago that I came back around to this and found information that said like, well, no, actually humans actually are carnivores as a species. That's how we've been for since the dawn of man, and and that because of these plants have these toxins and defense chemicals, obviously some worse than others, some are quite benign, but they have something in it that it's probably a better idea to just focus on eating fatty meat and not eating a plant. So I've exclusively eaten meat and not eaten any plants, not even seasonings, for about 6 years now. And then it was like another 5 years or so in my early 20s. And in between that, I was mostly eating meat and then just, some fruits and vegetables and breads and things like that in between. But that last sort of 5, 6 years have been just solid pure meat.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack there. Um, appreciate the valuable information. I mean, I hate interviewing you food guys because it's like, yo, what am I gonna eat? Air, just oxygen for the rest of my
Yeah.
life? I interviewed your guy Ben Azadi, I think his last name is pronounced.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I interviewed him twice. Shout out to all the vegans out there because they love replacing meat with
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Mm,
They love doing that. I wrote down several notes here.
yeah.
Vegans love doing that. So when you say exclusive meat, you're just talking about you don't eat any sides. It's just your whole plate's chicken and nothing else.
Yeah, yeah, and mostly beef. Yeah, so I eat a lot of steak. I just did a brisket, so I've got that. That'll feed me for like next like 5 days, And so yeah, no sides at all. I just eat fatty meat, and I focus on fatty meat. I get fattier cuts because that's actually an important nutrient, so an essential nutrient. There are essential fatty acids that you have to have. Even cholesterol is actually essential. We make cholesterol because we need it. Every single cell in our body is cholesterol. Cell membranes of all of our cells are cholesterol. And our brain is made up of fat and cholesterol as well. And all of our hormones are made out of cholesterol, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, vitamin D, all these things, everything made in your adrenal glands, all of that is made from cholesterol. So these are all very essential. And there's obviously, essential fatty or fat soluble vitamins, vitamin K2, D, and things like that, vitamin A. And so those are all found in the fat. And so I focus on that as well. And just meat, 100% meat.
So I know with the carnivore diet, people also eat eggs and milk and cheese, I believe. Do you do that as well or no?
Whoa, all the animal products?
Yeah, yeah,
Must be the
yes.
Antichrist, man.
Well, but it's we look at our biology. I mean, that is what we're designed for. We're designed to eat meat, and it's the most bioavailable stuff. Meaning that we have all the machinery and all the chemicals and enzymes and things like that to break down and absorb all these nutrients extremely well. We absorb about 98% of the meat we eat, as long as we don't eat it with plants and fiber, because plants actually have anti-nutrients and digestive disruptors that can actually block the digestion, breakdown, and absorption of nutrients, even if they're bioavailable. We can't do that with plants. There are a lot of nutrients that are just bound up. So you may say that spinach has a lot of iron, but it's not accessible to us. It's not bioavailable. We can't. It's bound up in ways that we don't have enzymes that can break it apart and absorb it. And same with proteins and a lot of different vitamins and minerals. And also, it just doesn't have a full complement of nutrients either. You could get a complete protein, but you're not going to get complete vitamin set and other nutrients or fatty acids. So, that's what we're designed for. That's how we're built. But yeah, eggs are great. Eggs are a complete protein. Eggs are considered like a perfect protein because they not only have all of the amino acids and proteins that we need and are best for us, but they're in the exact ratios that we need it. And the same with like red meat as well. So eggs are great. Some people have a problem with eggs. Some people, react usually to the egg whites. People have a bit more of a problem with the egg whites. And dairy, most people do okay with dairy, but some people react to that as well. The casein, the proteins in milk, and so therefore cheese and other sorts of things can be a bit pro-inflammatory, and so some people can have a bit of a reaction to that as well. I'll have eggs sometimes, and I'll melt cheese onto meat sometimes, but I usually use cheese as a condiment, and I really focus on the meat because the meat has all the nutrients, it has everything you need and maybe cheese just to help the flavor every now and then.
So, what do you say to those? Because I know there's certain myths, and I don't know if they've been debunked with the carnivore diet when it comes to, oh, constipation. You won't be able to go to the bathroom, and that's why veggies are there for help you go to the bathroom, bowel movement, and things of that sort.
Mhm. Yeah, so your digestion is actually driven by your fat and the fat that you eat. So your body has a limited capacity for absorbing fat. That's what our bile is for. So we make bile in our liver, and it sort of drips out into our gallbladder and into our intestine. And when we run out of that, you can't. It's very hard to absorb fat. So we can absorb a bit of fat without bile, but most of it goes out. And so it's that excess fat that we can't absorb that actually keeps your stool soft. And oil repels water, right? So it can actually sit there for a month, and it will still stay nice and soft because it's not going to get any drier than it already is. The argument with fibers, you want to move this through really quick before it dries out too much. But that's the entire purpose of the colon. Well, it's one of the major purposes of the colon is to dry out this chyle that comes out of your small intestine and turn it into solid feces. So you're working against your nature to speed that up and move that along, and you're actually losing more water than you want. You want to be conserving water. Most of the time, animals in the wild are dying of thirst or dying of hunger. So if you're going to be inefficient and just waste water like that, that's going to be a bit of a nightmare to survive in the wild. So you want to dry all that out. So it's actually that excess fat that keeps stool soft. And you'll find that if you're not eating fiber, if you're not eating plants, you actually absorb, again, like 98% of the meat that you eat, and very little will come out. So you may only go once or twice a week, but that's not constipation. Constipation is dry, hard stool. And so as long as the consistency is right, then you're not constipated, and you're fine. If you are a bit constipated, you're having dry, hard stools, then you just increase the amount of fat that you're eating, and that'll sort that out. The reason that people suggested in the 1980s that we eat a lot of fiber was because that was when we said stop eating fat. In 1977, the USDA said that cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease. They said stop eating it, and people listened. They really cut out fat out of their diet significantly. We dropped it by about a third in America. And all of a sudden, everyone's getting constipated, and they're like, "Oh, well, what happens? Well, what do we do?" And they say, "Oh, okay, well, why don't you eat more fiber?" That was actually quite a new suggestion, was eating more fiber, and that's when this idea of having something bulky to have peristalsis, so your intestine can move it along. That's when it came about. But I mean, think about how many animals in the wild don't eat fiber for roughage, and they go to the bathroom just fine. 66% of all animals are carnivores. They don't eat any fiber. And most herbivores, in fact, actually digest and break down the fiber. I mean, some don't. You look at like a horse's manure, there's definitely fiber in there. It still looks like grass, it looks like it was just mowed or something. But like a cow, that's just like a wet patty, because it's really broken down and absorbed all that fiber. So cows don't have this extra girth to move this stuff through. We don't need it either. And so that was a bit of a myth. That, well, it's a myth now, but back then it was just trying to help people out. They were getting constipated. They didn't want to eat fat. I thought that fiber would be a good weight loss thing as well, because then everyone actually, funny enough, when they stopped eating fat, the obesity rate started to climb up. It was actually very low before that, and it was very stable for decades. And then as soon as we said stop eating fat, the obesity rate started going up, and that's because we replaced all this fat, these healthy fats, with carbohydrates and sugars and seed oils and things like that aren't healthy and that cause metabolic distress and dysfunction. And so they're saying, okay, well, you can eat a lot of fiber, and it's really bulky, so it'll make you feel full, so you won't want to eat as much. And it doesn't have any calories, it doesn't have any nutrition. That was the argument. It didn't have nutrition. That's why you should eat it, because it'll make you feel like you're full, but it's not actually giving you something. Now they're calling it an essential nutrient, which is a bit ridiculous, because you can't get nutrition from it. You can't break it down. You get nothing from it by definition, because we can't break it down. So how can it be essential for life if we don't even get anything from it?
So you're out here eating all these animal products, and I know they want to tar and feather you, man. So what would you say to a tree hugger who says, man, yo, stop killing all these animals. You're hurting these animals, these dairy products, you're harming them. We're animals, don't hurt those animals. What would you say to
Mhm.
people like that?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I don't disagree with the sentiment. You know, the idea that, we should be kind of things I fully agree with. And I think that we can do this in a nice way or as nice a way as possible. But, when you look at the realities of it, it's not as black and white. It's, there's no perfect solution. There are only trade-offs. You're giving up one thing for another. And when you have when you're eating meat, okay, yes, you're killing an animal and you're eating that animal. Okay, what's the alternative? Okay, you're not going to eat that animal. You're going to get substandard nutrition. You're not going to get any things that are bioavailable. You're going to bring on food that also has defense chemicals and toxins and is less optimal. And if you want to make that decision for your life and your health, that's fine. But imposing that on other people isn't right either. And putting that on your children, putting that on your parents, so that they don't develop properly and they age prematurely and they get chronic diseases and they die earlier, that's not really right either. But if we're just talking about animal safety and and sort of the ethical concerns to do with eating animals, you have to understand that if you're not going to eat animals, if you're not going to raise animals to eat them or hunt them, then the alternative is to do this massive industrial farming. And what does that do? In order to make a big farm crop, you necessarily have to destroy an entire ecosystem. You have to kill all the plants and animals living in an area, and then you have to rip up the soil. You're losing billions of tons of topsoil a year. That's an ecological disaster. And you're spraying all these chemicals, all these fertilizers that rains, that runoff gets into the water, that kills a bunch of fish, destroys our waterways, and it so, you have to churn up and till the ground. You're killing all the snakes, the gophers, and the mice, and the birds that are around there. And then all the kangaroos and the deer and the hogs and different animals that are coming to try and eat your crop. You have to kill them. You have to lay out poison. You have to they actually hire snipers to shoot these things at night and kill them. And that meat doesn't get eaten. So you have thousands of pounds of meat just going to waste because, they're just trying to protect their crops. So there was a study from the University of New South Wales in Australia in 2011 that actually showed that to grow 1 pound of plant-based protein, you had to kill 25 times the number of sentient animals than if you were to get that pound of protein from meat. So sentient animals meaning thinking animals like mammals and birds and things like that, not just insects. And you're killing billions of insects, billions of bees every year die because they bring them out to fertilize all these crops and like almonds and things like that. But there's pesticides all over the place, so that they die. They go in there, they fertilize things, they get the pesticides, and they all die. So billions of bees are getting killed every year, and that's producing almonds and nuts and honey and all that sort of stuff. And that's quite harmful as well. So we have to think about these things because it's not just as simple as like, well, that kills an animal, therefore I'm not going to do it, because you're actually killing more animals by doing this other thing. And if you think about, and you're getting substandard nutrition, right? So there's that idea of bioavailability, that those proteins are not bioavailable. So that 1 pound of protein you're getting from plants, that's actually just the amount of protein, but that's not 1 pound of bioavailable protein. So you're probably getting 30% of that. And so you triple that. And that's how many animals you're killing, how many more animals you're killing just to grow 1 pound of usable protein. So it's not as cut and dry as that.
You know what I always found funny about the tree huggers is that they'll criticize humans for killing animals, but never criticize animals for killing animals. Because if we
Yeah.
never touch the chicken, guess what would happen? Another animal would eat the chicken. And they act like the chicken would go on to become president or something. Like, I not
Yeah.
saying that chickens are important, they're tasty, but it's like, I clearly hold humans above animals, right?
Mm.
I,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say as well, I mean, that is the deal. You have a social contract with these animals, right? You protect them in life, you feed them, and then they feed you. That's the deal. And yeah, I agree. You're not allowed to mistreat them. You're not allowed to abuse them. You're not allowed to lock them up and hurt them and all that sort of stuff. I think that's despicable. I think there's better ways of doing that. And I think that people can vote with their pocketbook. And so, I try to source things from like regenerative farms. I try to go to local sources and just buy directly from a farmer that I know is raising these animals in a fashion that's better for the animal, it's better for the land, and also going to be better for me as well. Um, and so, and that is the thing too. I always ask people like that, and just say, okay, so no one should kill any animal, so we should just get rid of all the carnivores, all the predators, all the lions, all the hyenas, all the dolphins, all the whales, all the birds, all the snakes. We just get rid of all of these things. And I said, well, no, no, no. I mean, that's just nature. That's just their nature. Those are just animals. It's like, right, we're in nature too. This is our nature. And if you look at all the best evidence, we have been apex predators, top of the food chain for millions of years. And is that we have just been eating animals underneath us. We've been eating megafauna, mammoth. I mean, it's very well known that we've been hunting mammoth probably to extinction or close to, and then it might have been like an extinction episode, 15, 20,000 years ago, that sort of wiped out the rest of the megafauna. But we're big game hunters. That's what we were eating. And people may have eaten some plants every now and then if they had to survive or use medicinally, but the vast majority of what they ate was meat. And if you think about during the ice ages, there was no plants to grow, there was no fruit available, so they had to eat meat. So just like the Inuit and people in like northern Alaska or in Siberia now, they just eat caribou, they just eat seals, they polar bear, whales. This is what they eat. They just eat meat because there's no plants available to grow anyway.
And real quick about being plant-based. Now, according to social media, there are a lot of people who are thriving off a plant-based diet. So I'm not sure if you think that's all a hoax or that they're doing something that maybe the average person who wants to be plant-based isn't doing.
Well, it depends. It depends on the person, but I know many people who've been plant-based for many, many years. One gentleman I had on my podcast, he'd been plant-based, vegetarian, vegan for about 21 years, and he because he was in it, he was like, "Oh, this is the best. This is the best," and eventually he just realized, like, man, I just feel awful, and he was very unwell, and he saw some of my videos and other people's videos, and he said, okay, I'm just going to try this, and he just started eating meat, and he just completely revolutionized his health. And so it's always compared to what some people will go to veganism from a processed food diet, eating a bunch of junk food and processed
Mm.
garbage and sodas and things like that, and then they go to a whole food vegetarian diet or vegan diet, and they, wow, I feel so much better. And I'm sure they do, because that stuff is
Right.
really, really bad. But all that other stuff is all plant-based. All that, sugar is from plants, right? Carbs are from plants. All those things are plants. You
Mm.
know, cookies and heroin are from plants, right? So, like, I mean, is that a good thing? Going vegan, just eating Oreo cookies, heroin all day? Is that a good idea? Right. Well, of course it isn't, right? I mean, that's a clear example of something that would not be a good idea, right? But it is plant-based and it is vegan. And so a lot of people think that because they go vegan, that means, and they have benefits from that means they have benefits from not eating meat, where in fact it's
Mhm.
more likely that it's positive that they're getting the benefits from not eating all the processed garbage. And I always ask them, and I say, oh, I feel so much better when I went plant-based. I said, okay, so is the only thing you changed just the meat? You just stopped eating meat, everything else is the same. They're like, yeah, 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 I just stopped eating, I just went vegan and that's it. I was like, okay, so you're still eating sugar, still eating candy, still drinking soda, still drinking alcohol, still smoking cigarettes. So like, oh, no, 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 no. I don't go to restaurants. I cook all my own food. I don't use any sauces. I don't use any sugar. I don't use any this, that, and the other. And so it's just like I don't drink alcohol anymore. It's like, okay, so you've just named about 10 things that you've dropped out, all of which are plants that are, very bad for you. So obviously there's a lot more going on there. So it's not a controlled experiment. They didn't just stop eating meat and then have all these benefits. 84% of vegans and vegetarians start eating meat within the first year of going vegetarian for health reasons. They feel bad, they feel worse. Some people will go longer, and they can be better off. They have to heavily supplement. You have to take supplements. You cannot get even a basic complement of nutrients from non-animal based sources. Where plants and fungus just don't have these nutrients. So you can't get B12, D3, or K2. They don't exist. Kale will say, oh, it's a great source of vitamin K, but that's vitamin K1. And we need vitamin K2, and it's about 1% conversion from vitamin K1 into K2. So that's just misleading marketing. You'll never get enough vitamin A because you'd have to eat 6 pounds of carrots a day to get enough vitamin A. You'll never get all the essential fatty acids for your brain. Your brain is made out of very long chain fatty acids, 20 and 22 chain fatty acids. Those don't exist in plants. We don't really make them very well ourselves. You have to get them from meat, or your brain's not going to develop properly. It's not going to maintain itself properly. 70% of your brain is fat. 20% of that fat is DHA and EPA. Those don't exist in plants. We don't really make them very well ourselves. You have to get them from food you eat. And that's why they call fish brain food, because there's a lot of DHA and EPA in it. So you're not going to get basic nutrients. So if you can't get basic nutrients from this food source, obviously that is not our biologically designed and appropriate diet, and it's certainly not our optimal diet. A lot of these guys have to take a lot of supplements, and they're probably eating clean, like whole foods, they're not eating processed garbage, and they're taking a lot of supplements, or maybe they're still eating eggs or having some fish or something like that. There's something like 75% or more of vegans eat meat when they're drunk, or have admitted to eating meat when they're drunk.
Definitely.
So, yeah, and so I don't know how pure they're being. I don't know if they're even being honest. There've been a lot of vegan influencers that have been caught eating meat, and they've made a huge social media name for themselves just eating. And then they all of a sudden they get caught, and like, oh my god, and they just get And then someone was saying, just like, look, my health was suffering. I was just having a horrible time. I was really sick. I was really unwell. And my doctor said you have to eat meat, and I started eating meat, and I just felt a lot better. I'm really sorry, but this is about my health. I'm getting really sick. And so I know a lot of I work with a lot of people one-on-one, as patients, trying to optimize their health, and get them better. And I have a number of people who have previously been vegan, and they were extraordinarily sick. There's one gentleman that had serious neurological damage because he can die. Yeah, well, B12 is vital for your brain and your nervous system. If it gets below level 400, you can actually start getting demyelination and nerve damage, right? And we actually see this in my field of neurosurgery. We actually see on MRIs of the spine, we actually see the spinal cord actually thin out in people that are B12 deficient. And in vegans and vegetarians, it's much more common for them to have very thin spinal cords. And so this can be permanent, and this can be very, very serious. And so this gentleman, I think he was down to like 90 pounds. He's 6 foot tall. He's dying.
Wow.
And he was so damaged neurologically that he couldn't hold a pen. He was like a claw hand. He couldn't really hold a pen. And he realized that at that point he couldn't pick up his phone. He was like, okay, I've
Is he?
no time. Sorry.
You were frozen for a bit. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that he was a vegan and raw food vegan and fruitarian and all this sort of stuff. And, anytime one of these guys has these major health problems and start eating meat, the hate squad comes out and says, "Oh, you just weren't doing it right. You weren't doing it right." I was like, "No, the problem is these guys were doing it right. There's no right way to do it. This will always be nutritionally deficient, and if you're not taking a ton of supplements, then you're going to get very serious nutrient deficiencies." There's actually a study out of Oxford in 2008 where they studied people eating different ways, but they had a vegan cohort, and they found that after 5 years, that their brains actually shrank by over 5%. The volume of their brain actually went down, and they thought this was likely due to this demyelinative effect of low B12, because they had extraordinarily low B12. Like below 400, you can start getting demyelination. Theirs was like 100. And so, that's very, very critically low. B12 is a bit funny because our reference ranges are a bit off. When we look at these in medicine, the reference ranges, when you go to a lab, it will be basically the first 2,000 people that come in and get that test. That's your reference range. And so that's why reference ranges differ at every lab in every country and every city. And so that's not really helpful because 90% of Americans have at least one metabolic illness. And so the average person is unhealthy, at least to some degree. And so you're looking at that average, you're looking at the average unhealthy person. So the reference range for B12 can be anywhere from 140 to 650. That's a pretty normal range here in Australia and in the US. But under 400 is actually B12 deficiency. So you may not even pick up on this. So maybe someone who's vegan, they're taking some supplements and they're up at like 200 or so, and their doctor's like, oh, well, it's not, you're not deficient, but they're actually getting neurological damage because of that. And that builds up and that causes harm. This gentleman that I was referring to, he's back eating meat and he's back doing a carnivore diet, and his hands are working again. And he's put on like 30 pounds. He's like 130 pounds now. So like, yeah, 40 pounds or so. And of muscle, it's not fat. And so he's starting to get his life back. He's starting to be able to, walk more and get out of bed, whereas before he was so weak he couldn't get out of bed. So, I mean, he was literally dying. And so, yeah, so it was very serious. And so, I mean, I'm sure there are people doing very, very well, certainly as compared to what they were eating before, 100%. The people that are doing vegan long term that are saying, I'm doing so well, 100% have to be supplementing and or cheating and eating meat every now and then, because you simply cannot get the proper nutrients.
I gotta talk to my boy Baron. My boy Baron, he's vegan and he lets us know the benefits. He go on these 2 week juice fasts and all that.
Mm,
He said towards the end his body's like extremely weak, but
mm.
but he does eat some mushroom. He eats some vegan pizzas. I wonder how vegan they are now. Now that you mention it,
Yeah.
I wonder if
Yeah.
some of these vegan places put some of the special carnivore sauce in there to make them feel some
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these vegan products that you get from the store, they're fortified with vitamins. Like they have to stick a bunch of vitamins and minerals in there because they don't exist in plants, right? And so you have to supplement. And so if you're doing that intelligently, and you're eating a certain complement of food, and you're getting complete proteins, and you're supplementing and you're taking these vitamins, you're getting B12 injections, and you're taking vitamin D3 and K2 and vitamin A, and you're not really going to get the fatty acids that you need. You're not really going to make them very well yourself. So that's a hindrance. But you can survive, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you are definitely going to be better off and feel much better and be much healthier if you actually ate proper meat and stopped eating these plants that 100% have well documented, categorized, and detailed toxins. You know, any botany professor can tell you this. Well, why haven't we been told about this? Well, why doesn't anybody know about this? Every every botanist on earth knows this. And I've spoken to several, and I've studied botany as well, not to like a degree level, but I've taken classes in college. This is just a normal thing. I was actually taught in seventh grade biology that plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them, so they can survive and thrive, right? Nothing's made it through the gauntlet of evolution without being able to defend itself, right? And then animals becoming more and more adapted to specific poisons, specific plants, so that they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. But that's why you see, animals in the wild, they eat very specific food. Like food in on this planet is extremely specific. Animals that eat only plants, they don't eat a wide variety of plants. They eat very specific plants, right? 340,000 plants on Earth. Koalas eat one. Pandas eat one. Gorillas eat leaves, but they eat different leaves than giraffes, and they eat different leaves than deer. And you mix those leaves around, they all get sick or die, right? So, a koala can eat this. Almost nothing else eats eucalyptus, but a koala can't eat anything else because it doesn't have the physiology to break down other plants safely and extract the nutrients properly. And they have to stay right in their lane. They run out of eucalyptus, they run out of life. That's it for them. We have a bit more range. And so we can eat a bit more things, and we also hybridize things, and we breed things to be a bit less toxic and a bit less toxic. And so we can make more edible plants, right? But that doesn't mean that that's optimal for us. That means that we've been able to survive on them. But and that definitely gave a survival advantage when we didn't have the right food, we didn't have enough meat, we were able to survive on grain or on something else. And that let people survive. But that doesn't mean that that's optimal. That doesn't mean that that's the best thing for us. And if you look at different populations, people from different areas, like people from Europe would have had exposure to agriculture around 8 to 10,000 years ago. So they have a bit of more defenses built up against some of these plant toxins. But then you go down to the Native Americans, Native South Americans, Native Australians, and they were just introduced to farm crops in the last couple hundred years, and really only started eating them in any great amount probably in the last 150 years. You see they get these so-called chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases. They get them at a much, much higher rate. And that's what they used to call it. They used to call it diseases of the West, because like the European countries would go out and they would go to a different area, and they'd notice that like people in Americas or even sub-Saharan Africa and Australia and other places that didn't have agriculture, they noticed that they weren't getting the same diseases that the Europeans were. And so they called it diseases of the West. They said these are Western diseases. Well, when other people started eating the food of the West, they started getting the diseases of the West. And in fact, it got them much, much, much more quickly because they didn't have the defenses against that. And so that's something that we're talking now about in pets. We're saying now that dogs and cats and domesticated pets, that they're actually their increased prevalence of human diseases, so-called human diseases that we don't normally only see in humans, like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases, right? Same things that used to be the diseases of the West, they're now just human diseases. This is what humans get. And now we're seeing dogs and cats are getting human diseases, and they're getting more and more human diseases, right? Well, that's because we're feeding them human food. We're feeding them things that they wouldn't normally eat, that they're not adapted and designed to eat. Dogs and cats are carnivores. So, we know this. They're wolves and lions, right? And so we feed them grain and plant-based kibble. There's this big weird movement now to say, oh, give your dog broccoli and fresh green. Like, why? Why would you ever feed a wolf fresh cut greens? These things don't even exist in the wild. Broccoli doesn't exist in the wild. And, and they're getting sicker. And this is something that you see in any zoo or any park. You'll see signs that say, don't feed the animals. It's always funny to me. It says, don't feed the animals the thing that you're eating right now. It's because it makes them sick. Well, like, what's it doing to you? And that's the thing. It makes them sick, right? It gives them diabetes and heart disease and cancer and all these other things. Animals in the wild don't get cancer. Humans in the wild, living naturally as hunter-gatherers, don't get cancer when they're just eating meat. We get cancer. Cancer rates are going up dramatically. If you ask any zookeeper, they can tell you, you feed an animal something that doesn't eat in the wild, something it didn't evolve on, it gets very sick, and it gets all of these things. It gets obesity, heart disease, liver disease, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune diseases, all the rest. And they'll even say, I actually spoke to one. Knowing the answer, I like testing these things. I asked him, I was like, okay, would you ever, what do you guys feed these guys? You ever get them like kibble, like dog food and stuff like that? And he said, are you out of your mind? You give them that, they'll get human diseases, right? Human diseases, right? These are not communicable. Dogs are not catching cancer from us. Leopards are not catching Crohn's disease from us, right? But if you feed the thing what we're eating, they're going to get the diseases we're getting because it damages your body in a certain way. I think that's why I think that these so-called human diseases, but also chronic diseases in general, are not diseases per se. I think that they're a combination of toxicities and malnutrition. Toxic buildup of a species-inappropriate diet and a lack of species-specific nutrition, namely too many plants that we are not evolved to eat. We don't have the biomechanics to break down safely, and then not enough meat that is going to give us our most available nutrition source and a complete nutrition source. This is actually demonstrable because you can remove these food items and the diseases go away, right? I mean, I learned that when I was a kid, actually. With the Native Americans, when eating a Western diet, were 4 times as likely to get obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and all. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, doesn't that mean the food is causing the disease? Because if they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. And we eat the food and we get the disease just at a lower rate, and what are they eating that we're not? And vice versa. What's a non-Western diet? Well, you know it at the time, but they were just eating like buffalo, just meat and fatty meat. And they were just carnivores. They were eating as carnivores. So there's also studies showing this, that if you remove carbohydrates and put someone on a ketogenic diet, you reverse diabetes. You get people off insulin. You get them off medication. What does that mean? That means diabetes is not a disease. It's carbohydrate poisoning. That's what it is. It's like the ancient Romans when they had lead pipes. They all had low-grade lead poisoning. And so they were just like, well, I guess this is just normal. I guess you're supposed to age like this and die this young and all that sort of stuff. And then people figured out, like, no, actually, this isn't normal. Something else is going on. They figured out they were being poisoned by the pipes. Well, we're in our lead pipes now. We're being poisoned by the food that we're eating. We don't realize it. We're just calling it normal aging. It's not normal. It's never been normal. And we can see this historically, and we can see it right now. You remove carbohydrates, sugar, and alcohol, you reverse type 2 diabetes. That has been shown and proven in clinical trials with thousands of patients by Professor Steve Finney, who's been doing work on this for decades now. Also, with Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, there are studies showing that if you remove all of these excess foods and things like that, just put someone on an elemental diet, just getting the nutrients they need and nothing else, right? That's a better treatment for an acute flare-up of Crohn's disease, which is horrible. You get bloody diarrhea 30 times a day, and you're in horrible pain. You get skin ulcers and all sorts of horrible problems. You have to be on terrible medication that's toxic to your body, but that's the only thing that keeps this stuff down. That acute flare-up of that, you can treat that better by just putting them on an elemental diet than even putting them on high dose steroids like prednisone, which should just completely stamp down your immune system, right? So just removing the food is a better treatment than the best drugs that we have. What does that mean? That means there's something in the food that they were eating that's causing the disease, because it just goes away once you remove that. There was another study with Crohn's disease that had 2 groups. It was a controlled trial. And so group 1 removed carbohydrates and fiber. Not much left in the plant kingdom without carbohydrates and fibers. Mostly you're just eating fatty meat. And then contrasted that with the group that still ate carbs and fibers, basically ate normally, or what we think of as normal. The group that removed carbs and sugar in remission of their Crohn's disease on average 51 months. So that's over 4 years, right? Contrast that with the group that kept eating carbs and fiber, and they stayed in remission on average 0 months, right? Not a lot of months. And so what does that mean? That means there's something in the carbs and the fiber that is kicking off and precipitating this disease. And if you remove it, it goes away.
We're learning a lot here, a lot to take in, Giggity. What? So you said there are no carbs in meat?
Oh, barely any. I mean, there's some glycogen in the muscle. There's some glycogen in the liver, which is strings of glucose, but it's not in the same pattern as like fiber or anything like that. So you'll get a little bit, but you won't get that much.
So what kind of, because according to stats and statistics that I hear, they put just as many toxins in the meat as they do the plants. Now, I could be falsely, informed, so please tell me if I am. But what kind of meat do you eat? Do you eat free range? Do you eat a specific kind? Do you grow your? No, you can't grow meat. But do you kill your cattle personally, or?
Well, I mean, that's definitely the aim. I would love to do that eventually. I'd love to have, some cattle and just have my own animals and know exactly how they were raised, exactly how they were treated, and exactly how, what they were fed and everything like that. I definitely would like that. No, but the idea that meat is just full of this poison is definitely propaganda. They're saying that, well, they give them all these growth hormones and things like that, and that makes them full of steroids. You're eating this beef, and it's just like eating steroids. Like, if it were, every bodybuilder on earth would I mean, the stores would be bought out, from like every teenage kid trying to make the football team.
I've interviewed bodybuilders. You are not lying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and if you look at it, what they say is technically correct, but it's also very misleading. They don't tell you the whole story. Everything matters in context, right? And so they say, well, if you hormone treat a cow, then it has double the amount of estrogen as a non-hormone treated cow. That's basically correct. You have 3 ounces of lean beef has 2 nanograms of estrogen, and then hormone treated beef has 3.9 nanograms of estrogen on average. And so, yeah, that's technically correct. It's just about double. I agree with that. But what's the context? Well, the context is that the birth control pill has 35,000 nanograms of estrogen, and a fertile woman makes 150 to 180,000 nanograms of estrogen every single day. And so that 1.9 nanogram bump is really not doing anything. And then what do you do? Again, what do you replace it with? What's the alternative, right? Because again, there's no solution, there's only trade-offs. So you stop eating meat, what do you eat instead? Well, a lot of people eat soy. Soy is a good source of protein, right? Well, it's also a good source of estrogen. And
Right.
3 ounces of soy can have over 1 million nanograms of phytoestrogens that can link onto your estrogen receptors. And so 8 glasses of soy milk a day is enough estrogen to grow breasts in a man,
You said
right?
8 glasses?
8 glasses. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I mean, you would have to want to have breasts to drink 8 glasses, but still.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, yeah, but that just puts it in context, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's how much estrogen is there. I mean that's like putting someone on hormonal therapy, by putting
So
them on.
so if I decided to transition, I don't really need surgery. I could just
Yeah,
get
just a
a
little,
boatload
just
of
start
soy milk.
just bucketing down soy milk. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy to
wow.
think about. Wow.
Yeah.
I need to go
Yeah.
under the
So that,
knife.
yeah. Well, and so that's the contrast. So they're saying one thing, but they're saying this, oh my gosh, meat is so, and you know what? This is pervasive because I've spoken to patients. One lady had breast cancer, and some breast cancers are sensitive to estrogen, right? So they give like estrogen blockers to block that growth signal because estrogen can signal it to grow. And her oncologist said, don't eat meat, especially red meat, because they're just full of these hormones, right? It's full of estrogen. Not understanding that context and not understanding that now she's putting her on to eating plants that have way more estrogen. I mean, even just cabbage. Cabbage has way less estrogen than soy, but it still has like 400 nanograms of estrogen for
I
those
love
3 ounces.
cabbage, man. I'm
Versus
Jamaican. We love cabbage, man. What are you doing
yeah,
right now, Lord?
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of cultures would like ferment things and treat them in certain ways, and that can, fermenting like soy, like the Chinese and things like that. They almost never traditionally would have eaten just straight up soy. They fermented soy, and it was like a survival ration that if they had to do it, if they were dying and there's a famine, they're like, okay, we'll survive on that crap. But they fermented it, and that fermentation process can take out some of the toxins and remove some of the estrogens as well and make things more bioavailable. So we have figured out over thousands and thousands of years that we can chemically alter and manipulate the plants that we're eating to make them a bit more bioavailable and a bit less toxic. I mean, think of just beans, right? Just like kidney beans, right? Pretty normal thing for people to eat, right? Well, we have to soak them for a certain period of time, usually several hours, and then we boil them for a certain period of time. And that's not just because that's a good way of cooking and it makes them nice and soft. That's because there are things called lectins in there, which are very, very dangerous defense chemicals that can be life-threatening if you eat them and don't denature them. So even like the WHO, the World Health Organization, who like actually pushes like a plant-based agenda, they have articles talking about all these different natural defense chemicals and toxins that exist in plants, and they talk about kidney beans specifically. And they say that there have been numerous reports and accounts of people being hospitalized for eating as little as 5 kidney beans without cooking them, and even undercooking, cook it sort of like al dente, so it's sort of not quite all the way cooked. That can be more poisonous than just eating them raw. And so these are things that we have to contend with. And There's like in corn. Corn was very popular, and when we discovered this from like Mesoamerica, and people there were eating it and seemed to be doing fine. They ate it with other things as well. And it's usually the poor people who were eating this because they couldn't afford and they had the same access to meat as like the more wealthy people. And that's been true throughout history, is that people who could afford meat ate meat, and it was the poor people who had to eat more plants. So they figured out this process called nixtamalization, which is what the word tamales come from, right? And so they soak it in lye, and they do all these different sorts of chemical processes to it, and it sort of detoxifies it a bit, and it sort of frees up some nutrients. And so they were doing okay with it. We took that to Europe and to the rest of America and started growing a lot of it because it was easy to grow everywhere. And it's completely unnatural. That does not exist in nature. That was completely hybridized and bred. So a lot of people were eating it, especially the poor, and they were getting very sick, and they were getting something called pellagra, and it was fatal. And people were like, skin was sloughing off. They're getting very unwell, and people didn't know what was going on. They thought it was like an infectious disease, and they're trying to figure it out. And then someone figured out, no, it's actually a vitamin deficiency, a niacin deficiency. And, and they figured out that they had to supplement this, or, put some niacin in it, or eat it with other things because you could die. The irony of that is that corn actually has a lot of niacin in it. It's just bound up in ways that we can't access because, again, we are not designed to eat corn. We don't have the natural ability to break it down and take out the niacin. So we have to put chemical processes in. If you have to do any sort of chemical process, any industrial process, any process at all, you can't just put it in your mouth and eat it, then you're not designed to eat it. Right? Now we can figure things out through scientific method and trial and error, try to make things more accessible, nutrient wise, and less toxic. But that is just still proving the fact that we're not designed to eat this stuff. Because if we were designed to eat it, we could naturally do it. Our natural enzymes in our liver could just detoxify the stuff and just break it down very easily. But it can't. But that's what like fermentation is about. It can detoxify things and free up these nutrients. So things like like sauerkraut or kimchi and all these sorts of other fermented cabbage products or other things, like that's what that's about. It's sort of detoxifying them a bit and making their nutrients a bit more available. So you can do things, make things a little better for you, but it's still not as good as just eating meat, which is almost 100% bioavailable, and we absorb nearly all of it, and we get everything we need from it. We don't need to supplement.
So real quick, so processed meat, I'm assuming is bad, like hot dogs. Like I'm assuming that's bad. And
Pork.
and another question I have is the average meat that we'd buy at the grocery store. Like let's say hypothetically, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like a Key Food or a Sea Town or just a local grocery market where you go, you pick up a steak, you go, you pick up some chicken, you go, you pick up some lamb. Would that be good? Or like a person, I get rotisserie chicken from BJ's. Is that chicken all, or is that meat all good, or do we have to look for something specific when we go shop?
No, pretty much all store-bought food meat is fine. The vast majority of it. And then the other argument is like, they put in a bunch of antibiotics and all that sort of stuff. So it's like you're taking, a course of antibiotics when you eat a chicken. Like, of course that's not true. But it's a waste of money, isn't it? If you're going to load them up with so much antibiotics that's just going to be in their muscle and their tissue at a dose that's like, a therapeutic for us, like you're just wasting money. And antibiotics cost money, and growth hormones cost money. So you give them to them early so they grow, and you give antibiotics to them early on so that they don't get sick and they grow. So these things mostly out of their system, by the time you get it. And so even something that's like, raised on a bigger ranch at a bigger farm, they're generally fine. The quality of the meat is good. And if you worry about exactly how the animal is raised and things like that, there are absolutely options for you. There's free range chicken. There's grass fed and finished cows. Not and you can find these things. Most cows are just raised on grass. Most sheep are just raised on grass, and then they might go into a feedlot for the last couple of months. But most of their life is just out in a field on a pasture, just eating grass. And so yeah, just any meat that you get at the store is fine. Is very good actually. It's very, very high quality, especially in respect to anything else you're going to eat. Now, is grass fed and finished or wild caught sort of thing better? Yeah, I think so. But when you talk about like the difference, I think of it as winning gold and silver in the Olympics, right? Silver lost to gold, but silver also beat everyone else on earth, right? So it's not actually like that bad of a position to be in. And that's how I think of, just the normal sort of meat that you get at the store. Um, and then processed meats, you have to sort of ask, processed with what, right? So, ground beef is processed, right? It's gone through a process. And salami's processed, and sausage is processed, and hot dogs are processed. What are they processed with? They're processed with sugar, starches, grains, spices, plants. They add plants to it, and that's what makes them bad. Usually like the sugar and things like that. So you look at the ingredients and you just see, okay, this has just a bunch of plants and sugar and nonsense added to it. Okay, probably just give that one a pass. So it's yeah, but sometimes I'll have some salami or something like that. I won't go out of my way for it, and I do feel better when I don't have it. If I have it, I just sort of don't feel my best that day. But if I'm just eating, just straight up meat, I feel great. I feel amazing every day. And I still feel amazing with a bit of salami. I just feel even better with just whole meats and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you only eat like most of your meals consist of just only like protein and there's not really a side dish. Now, I haven't got to that level yet. So when I have my chicken, I like to have some rice, right?
Mhm.
So is that something that you recommend, or should we avoid that?
Well, it's still a plant and it's a grain. So grain is a seed. A seed is the plant's baby, and everything protects its babies more than anything. And so this is where you generally find the highest concentration of toxins and defense chemicals is in the seed or the grain or the nut or the legume and bean, things like that. So um, so as these things go, is white rice the worst thing ever? No. And if you're just eating meat and not being shy of meat and not being afraid of the fat, because the fat's very important. You need to eat a lot more fat than you think. Because most people say, like, oh, well, they increase the amount of fat that they eat, and they're like, wow, that's definitely enough fat. But they're not. Animals in the wild get between 70 and 80% of their calories from fat. The fat makes the animal kingdom go round, and humans are certainly in that category as well. I mean, like Inuits eat
Avoid fat.
blood.
We were
Yeah,
told to avoid fat, man.
yeah. Well, we were, and you know what? I caught myself. I was doing this sort of like 5, 6 years ago, and I was just eating meat again. I was feeling amazing, and I caught myself trimming the fat off. And I'm like, wait, whoa, whoa, what am I doing? I trust the research. I trust the evidence. I believe the evidence. Fat is good for me. Eat the damn fat. And I had to recondition myself to start eating fat. I had to start, and I couldn't do it because everything in me was saying, oh, fat's bad for you. Fat's bad for you. And so I sort of freaked myself out with it. And so I'd have to cut off little pieces of fat and put that with a lean piece of meat and eat those together. And that would actually taste really good. And so I just slowly acclimatized myself to eating fat again. Now I love it. Now it's like my favorite part. And so yeah, the fat's very, very important. As I was saying, it's not just a calorie source. It is an essential nutrient. So it's very, very important to get enough fat.
I secretly have always loved fat. But I was told that it's a bad thing, man. But now I can say
Yeah,
out loud and proud that I like fat and I will
yeah,
continue to eat it. Wow.
yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah, and the thing is that fat doesn't make you fat. Fat makes you lean, strong, and healthy. It's carbohydrates and sugar and things like that that makes you fat. Because so if you're just eating a lot of meat and you're having some rice, you're doing better than 99% of people out there. You're eating whole foods and you're eating a lot of meat and you're getting a lot of fat. You're going to be doing really well. But to get into like the stratosphere of your health and how you feel, if you get rid of just that last 5% of plants, especially carbs, like you will feel better than you've ever felt in your entire life. I can guarantee you that. And carbohydrates in particular, because they actually derail your metabolism. They take you out of ketosis, which I think is actually our body's primary metabolic state. We talk about fed state and a fasting state and how we're in a starvation state and it's stressing our body and we're in this survival mode. That's complete nonsense. Because if I eat 5,000 calories in ribeye, I'm not fasting. I'm not in a starvation state. I am fine, very happy. I'm very content. I'm very satiated, and I'm very comfortable. And so we've misnamed that. I took biochemistry, and that's what we learned. The fed state is the fasting state, and that's because I think by the time we were able to look at our biochemistry at a molecular level, everyone was eating carbohydrates. And so they studied, it's like, oh, when you eat, it looks like this. And when you don't eat, it looks like this. Not realizing the fact that when you eat anything else besides carbohydrate, it also looks like you're so-called fasting. And that's where all of our heavy machinery comes to bear. That's where all of our big biochemical processes are, we stimulate our stem cells, we grow new cells, we sort of break down the older organelles and cells that aren't really working that well. We make them new ones that are big, better and fresher and shinier and more of them. And so they work a lot better. And so this is why people say you need to fast for, a certain number of days a week or a month or something like that, because you get all these benefits from fasting. You get every single one of those benefits just by not eating carbs. And if you're just eating meat, you're going to get all those benefits and you're going to get nutrition. So it's actually much better to just eat a bunch of meat. And so and just eating carbs in general, it just changes your metabolism, because when you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar goes up, and blood sugar is actually very damaging. When your blood sugar gets too high, it actually harms you. So those glucose molecules actually physically fuse to other molecules and damages them permanently. We can't fix them, right? You have to completely destroy that molecule or that cell to then scavenge it for parts and things like that. But it's permanently damaged until you break it down and rebuild it. And so when you eat a bunch of carbohydrates, your body sees this as an attack, or as a problem anyway. And so you raise your insulin to try to get this down, because it's very, very dangerous. This is what kills diabetics. It's long-term exposure to high blood sugar. And that's why we measure their HbA1c. That's a marker of their blood sugar control over the course of 3 months. And so the higher that is, the quicker they die, and the quicker they have problems, and the quicker they have amputations and heart disease and things like that. And so your body's trying to protect you by increasing your insulin, trying to get this stuff down, get this stuff down, get this stuff down. But insulin stays up for a long time, it has a long half-life. And so it can stay up for about 24 hours, and it derails your whole metabolism during that time. So insulin forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. So as soon as you eat those carbohydrates, you've locked your fat cells. You cannot access them for energy anymore. So you have to run on carbohydrates. And so what happens? Your insulin stays up, and now your blood sugar is going down, and now you're hungry again, and you're tired, and you feel miserable. You have to eat again. You have to eat more carbs, and you have to keep feeding the beast. You keep feeding the carbs, feeding the carbs, and feeding the carbs. And that whole time, you're just locking your fat down harder and harder and harder. So you don't burn any fat. It also does something a bit more insidious than that, which is it blocks a hormone called leptin, which is probably one of the master hormones in your entire body. It regulates so many other things in your body. And it's also a satiety signal. So it's secreted you get from your stretch receptors. That's why people are saying, oh, you should eat fiber in the 80s, because it fills up your stomach and you release leptin, and that tells your brain, oh, we're full, we're fine. Okay, so some of it is released from your stomach, but the majority of it is released from your fat cells, and that goes to your brain and tells you how much energy you have. It's like a running gas gauge, right? But insulin blocks that. And so now your brain gets a signal that you have zero energy reserves because you can't see the leptin, and your blood sugar is dropping. And it sends a panic signal that says, if you don't eat now, you will die. And this is why multiple times a day, people freak out, and I have to eat, I have to eat, I have to eat, and they get in a panic. Even though they've just had 5,000 calories in pancakes, 3 hours ago, and now they're panicked. They have to eat. Why? They've had enough food for 3 days, right? But that's exactly what they're feeling. That's exactly the signal that they're getting. That is a pathological starvation signal that says you have to eat. And so people do, because that's a very, very hard signal to ignore. It's very painful to ignore that. And we have jokes about someone being hangry and things like that, and it's funny. They end up on TikTok and things like that, freaking out because someone stole their sandwich or something like that. But that is what they're getting. They're getting this panic state because their body's telling them that they're going to die. They don't eat, and that's part of the hormonal disruption that you get when you eat carbohydrates, and so it causes you to overeat. very easy to overeat. And it's very hard to lose weight in a carbohydrate-driven hyperinsulinemic state as well, because that insulin is blocking your body's ability to access your fat cells. Whereas when you're just eating meat, you're not eating carbs, you always are accessing your fat stores. So it's just like your fat cells are just a gas tank, and you're just running on your gas tank. And you make carbs through gluconeogenesis. You make blood sugar. You make glycogen. You make ketones, which is actually the preferred energy source for many of your tissues in your body. Your muscles run on glycogen and glucose, right? But you make glycogen and glucose. Your brain runs on ketones. Your heart runs on ketones. And so, and your gut runs on ketones. These are very, very, very important energy sources that get shut down when you eat carbohydrates. When you eat carbohydrates, insulin goes up, shuts down the production of energy. You shut down your ketones. You shut down your body's ability to make to go through gluconeogenesis and to make blood sugar and liver glycogen. So you can run on your glycogen from that rice, and then when that's going down, you've got to eat more because you cannot replenish it yourself. So it sort of gets people in a vicious cycle. So if you're just eating meat and rice, again, you're going to be doing better than most people out there. But you can do remarkably better by dropping the rice as well.
Okay. I only got like a couple more questions left. Appreciate the time for sure. But I think everybody wants to know, what are the dangerous plants that we should avoid? Because you named a lot earlier, and I'm a fan of just about all of them. I love Brussels sprouts, man. But please tell me the heartbreaking news, please, because I can't eat anything, clearly.
Yeah. Well, anything that contains carbohydrates, I think that should be right. Anything with sugar as well, even fruit. Sweet fruit generally has less other toxins in them, but it's not devoid of toxins. It does have toxins in them. All citrus have furanocoumarins, which are light sensitive, react with UV light, and can bind irreversibly to proteins and DNA. And so even people that are like squeezing limes out in the sun, they can actually get second-degree burns on their hands and their skin where that lime is in the sun. Happened to my little brother, actually, when he was when we were kids in California, and he was sort of playing around the lime tree. We thought he was having like an anaphylactic reaction. We're like, oh, keep that kid away from the lime tree. But years later, he was like drinking Coronas with limes in it. And we're like, isn't that going to kill you? And he's like, I don't know. Maybe it's like the Corona, like neutralizes it. I'm like, yeah, probably not.
That's funny.
Might be something else going on. But looking back, that's probably what was happening. He reacted to the furanocoumarins in limes. This is why you can't eat grapefruit or drink grapefruit juice when you take certain medications, because the enzymes that detoxify those furanocoumarins in grapefruit also metabolize certain medications that we use all the time, like statins. And so if you are eating that grapefruit, you're going to use up that enzyme, and you're not going to be able to metabolize your medication properly. So you're not going to get enough, or you're going to get too much. And so you can get toxicity and toxic levels of these meds. So that's not safe. But generally, things that are sweet have less of those toxins. But the sugar itself is harmful. There have been studies showing causation in humans between fructose consumption and metabolic disease and fatty liver disease. And so this is something that's implicated in like type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, right? So it's actually causative. There's a professor, Robert Lustig of UC San Francisco, actually showed studies in humans that you could reverse metabolic syndrome just by removing fructose, and it met the Bradford Hill criteria for causation. So fructose causes metabolic syndrome, causes diabetes, causes a lot of metabolic dysfunction and disease, and it's also addictive, like a drug. It actually gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers of your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. And there have been MRI studies that actually show that fructose kills the same areas of your brain as meth to the same extent as meth. And it also damages your body like alcohol, because fructose is metabolized by your liver into the same byproducts that alcohol is broken down into. So you get the same damage to your body from those breakdown products in fructose as you do from alcohol. So you get fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, even heart disease is implicated in cancer and Alzheimer's, as well as many other things. So I think sugar is a very harmful drug, specifically fructose, and this is in everything. They put this in everything, and the food companies know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly why they're doing this, because it is absolutely addictive. And so people will eat more of it, eat more of it, eat more of it. And so I think anything with sugar is just right out the door. Anything with carbohydrates, just get out. Because I think that's the main thing that you should get rid of. And again, a lot of these things with carbohydrates, a lot of these things are the beans and the seeds and legumes. Legumes and beans, they are toxic. These lectins that they have can be deadly, you know. And there are tons of these things. Like, I mean, you know, the WHO talks about this. Like, I mean, these beans can kill you if you don't boil them and process them right. You know, I mean, think about ricin. Ricin comes from beans. Ricin is a lectin. It's a protein in the castor bean. You know, get castor oil. It's like uses as like a laxative. Ricin is left over in there. That is the most poisonous thing that we know of on Earth. 1 microgram, so 1 millionth of a gram per kilogram of body weight will kill you, right? Of ricin.
Ricin. And
Ricin, yeah. So it's a poison, and like assassins have used this for like hundreds of years, you know, if not longer. You know, like every now and then, like a politician or something like that will get some letter sent to them, and they're like they have some like anthrax in it, or sometimes they'll have like ricin, and it's just like a powder, and then you just sort of open up and get it on your skin. It will soak in your skin, and it will kill you. There is no cure for it. There is no antidote. You will die. And so this is the most poisonous thing that we know.
where do you find ricin in?
Castor beans.
Castor beans.
Yeah.
Are those commonly consumed?
No, but castor oil is. And so this is yeah, and so that's and so the ricin is left over and they get rid of it, safely burn it, whatever. And but that's just an example of how toxic beans can be. Because this is a seed, and they want to protect that seed. Even fruit, some fruit will kill you. I mean, you can't just if you go out and get lost, and you're hungry, you can't just pick random berries off bushes. Like most of those will kill you. Most of those are very toxic because the plant wants a specific animal to eat it and move their fruit, usually birds. And so, if a bird isn't eating that, then maybe that seed doesn't germinate. There are a lot of berries and fruits that only germinate if a bird eats it. So there's a good example of that is a cassowary bird that's in the tropics. It only eats fruits. It's about 150 different fruits that it eats. Those seeds have to go through the digestive tract of a cassowary bird or they won't germinate. And then, so if the cassowary bird doesn't eat it, that seed will not turn into a plant. So if the cassowary bird actually leaves an area or there aren't enough cassowary birds to like eat all the fruit, then they won't be able to multiply. If a cassowary bird leaves the area, those plants will die out. And every single one of those fruits will kill you. Because they don't want you to eat it. They want the cassowary bird to eat it. And so this is just, most plants on Earth will kill you. Most plants on Earth will be very, very sick. And in very small doses can actually kill you. Hemlock, half a leaf of hemlock is enough to kill an adult, right? And so, the things that we're eating, some of these things are actually deadly poisonous as well. It's just that we figured out how to like kidney beans, like red kidney beans are highly, highly, highly toxic. But boiling them and all that stuff is able to reduce that significantly so that we can safely consume them. That doesn't mean to get rid of all of these things. There are things like cassava. Like if you go to the tropics, you'll see like little patches like potato chips, but it'll be like cassava chips. It's like a root. And they'll make chips out.
I know cassava. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So cassava, there's two kinds of cassava, bitter cassava and sweet cassava. They both contain cyanide. And the bitter cassava, cyanide, yeah. And so bitter cassava has so much cyanide that it is fatal. It will kill you if it's not prepared properly. And so people that are poor and they don't do this properly have died from this. And even then, even if you do prepare it properly and you don't die from it, you're not getting rid of all the cyanide. So even low-grade exposure to cyanide over time has been shown to cause neurological damage and thyroid dysfunction. It damages your thyroid, damages your brain, damages your nerves. And this is especially true in people that are undernourished in protein. And so, when you're in the tropics and, cassava is the #1 calorie source for 500 million people in the tropics. It's the third most important calorie source for all the tropics. And so a lot of people in these countries, some of them are quite poor, some of them are very, very malnourished. And so a lot of them
Mm.
protein deprived. And so they would be getting this thyroid damage and this neurological damage just eating what they can, even if they prepared it properly. So, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So I get rid of all seeds, all plants, I mean, almonds have cyanide in them too. Like a pound or two of almonds can be enough cyanide to kill an adult if you eat that in one sitting, which is hard to do, but you could do it. And that's sort of a good example of the defensive nature as well, because that cyanide isn't just floating around in there. But as soon as you crush it and chew it, like you're chewing with your teeth, then it releases this cyanide because it's saying, hey, something's trying to eat me, I'm going to kill it, right? So it's a response to an attack, right? And there are a lot of different chemicals, like in broccoli and others, that respond to that crushing. And as soon as you crush it, it releases this toxin. And this is why, like, if you have like a little bad patch on a vegetable, or like it's been like bugs have been eating it, you don't eat it. It's like, oh, that's not good. Bugs have been eating it. Well, why? Is the bug poisonous? Is the bug still in there? No, it's that the bug is attacking the plant, and the plant started making a lot more toxins to kill that bug from eating it. And so now that piece of fruit or vegetable is going to be more toxic than another example would be. And that's something that we knew historically, but then we just sort of forgot. Then the next one, and also you just don't want to eat carbs because you want to be in the proper metabolic state. After that, you want to get rid of things like nightshades. So potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, capsicums, things like that. Those are all in the nightshade family. We've known this for millennia, that you don't eat nightshades. These things will kill you. Tobacco's a nightshade. Belladonna's a nightshade. Oh, there's
I gotta give up fries, man.
yeah.
Sweet
Yeah.
potatoes. Ah, you're killing me.
Well, sweet potatoes aren't a nightshade, so that would be different. Yeah, so it's just like, just normal potatoes, not sweet potatoes.
It's,
Yeah. Well, but also those things what are they deep fried in, right? They're deep fried in like seed oils and things like that, which are toxic. Those things that we only invented those things like in the 50s. Like canola oil came up in the 50s. It was originally an industrial lubricant that they used in giant, machines and things like that. Which is neither here nor there, but that is the history. That's how they came about. They did not.
That's here and there. That's important.
Well, but it's but I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad for you. It just means that's how it came about. And that's what the vegans will say is like, well, what does it matter? They use whale oil as an industrial lubricant. That's true. But this was designed, this was pressed out of rapeseed, and this was made to use that. And they decided like, oh, well, maybe we could sell this to people as fat. We have so much of this stuff. It's easy to make. It's super cheap. We have the big markup on it. Maybe we can sell it to people. Well, the original stuff that they were going to use, the rapeseed oil, was so toxic that they were not allowed to sell it to people. So they bred less toxic rapeseed plants to then make what we know of now as canola oil. But it's still toxic. It's just less toxic than the original product, right? But like the poisons that were still in there that made it banned from being sold to humans is still in there. It's just at a lower level. And the process that they go through to make this, I mean, look it up on YouTube, man. It's disgusting. Like, you will not want to eat this stuff after you see this. And the chemicals that they add into this. I mean, they add bleach and a whole bunch of other like highly toxic chemicals that are known to be carcinogenic in humans. They add this stuff, and they have to cook it, heat it at high levels. They get very rancid and have a lot of inflammatory factors and things that cause oxidative stress. And so you're just mainlining in just pure, toxins and inflammation, and there's studies and people say like, well, these studies say that canola oil is actually okay and this, that, and the other. Okay, sure. Who's paying for the study? I guarantee you it's an industry funded research study that, they've manipulated in whatever way they want. That's we know about this. Coca-Cola, just Coca-Cola, spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research as the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, right? 11 times, right? And just Coca-Cola, right? So all the other big food companies are pumping out billions of dollars into this as well, so that they can say, oh, look at this. canola oil is fine. Look at this study. Look at this meta-analysis. Yeah, that's fine. You know, I'll look at the ones that actually show what's really going on and look at the actual chemicals that are in there. Well, that's mechanistic. You know, yes, it has cyanide. Yes, it has turpentine. Yes, it has bleach. Yes, it has formaldehyde. I'm not saying that seed oils have this, but I'm just saying they're saying that yes, you know, it can have all these poisons and all these toxins, but you know, that doesn't prove that this is actually bad for you if you eat it. I'm like, okay, well, you eat it and we'll see how you do. I'll just do my own thing. But either way, regardless of whether or not this causes harm or whatever, I do know this, that that didn't even exist when humans were evolving. That did not exist more than 50 years. I know for a fact it is not something that I need in my body, right? Because it didn't even exist when humans were developing. So it can't be something essential. It can't be something that we need because it didn't exist more than 50 years ago. And so, or 70 years ago. And so that's all I need to know, whether it's neutral or okay, or maybe even pretty good for you, or if it's bad. I know I don't need it. And so I don't need to care. I don't need to worry about it. I just go back to first principles. What kind of animal are humans? What are we? How did we evolve? What did we evolve on? What is our most optimal food? And that's just animal fat, animal meat, and animal fats, and animal source proteins and foods. So, you know, I don't even need to worry about these things because it didn't exist. You know, maybe we were eating some plants 50,000 years ago or 400,000 years ago. You know, Homo sapiens has been around for 300,000 years. So maybe we were eating some plants in there. Not really too many plants in the ice ages, though. Not many true fruits and vegetables available when people were crossing over the land bridge from Asia into North America. You know, it's just ice, right? They were eating meat. So either way, some people may have been eating some plants at some time, but none of those plants even exist today. None of those plants, what we're eating today, because none of the plants, I should say, rather, that none of the plants that we're eating today even existed 50,000 years ago. So if they didn't exist back then, we weren't eating them back then. And so even if you can say, well, we were eating plants back then, which plants? Because if you weren't specifically designed and adapted to eat that plant is bad for you, varying degrees. And so, you know, I just stay out of that argument altogether. But no, I think that there's plenty of evidence to show that seed oils are absolutely toxic. First of all, the disease prevalence of cardiovascular disease perfectly tracks the rise in consumption of seed oils throughout the 20th century. You have seed oil consumption going up, and then sort of like 10, 15 years after that, line of heart disease going right up after it. It perfectly tracks. The same with sugar. The more sugar we eat, and it perfectly tracks as you go up. And yet animal fats and saturated fats, that all this canola oil and all that sort of stuff, Crisco, that was, you know, trans fats, all that sort of stuff, replace these saturated the animal fats with. You know, animal fats were going down, heart disease was going up, right? So there's actually an inverse relationship between animal fat consumption and heart disease, right? So you can't say that animal fats and saturated fats from animals cause heart disease when there's an inverse relationship. The more saturated fat and animal fats we were eating, the lower the heart disease rate was. And now we're eating much less, and it's much higher. So, you know, I think there's enough there to make me very cautious of it. And also, I know for a fact I don't need it, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether. And then, yeah, then other plants, you know, tons of these things have oxalates. The spinach has tons of oxalates. You get kidney stones from these things. And so if you're going to eat any other plants at that point, if I haven't scared you enough, if you are going to eat any of these plants, I'd mix it up. I would eat just a little bit of them, and I'd eat a variety, and I'd mix it up every day because they're all going to have different toxins, and your body has some capacity for detoxifying these things. But if you will overload it pretty quick if you're just eating it every day, it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And you know, just like you're drinking alcohol every day, you can overwhelm your system and your body's ability to detoxify the stuff, and you start getting liver damage. And so just try to mix it up. Don't eat too much of it. Don't eat carb, don't eat sugar, don't eat beans, don't eat seeds, don't eat nightshades. And you know, and if you are going to have some of these things, you know, try to eat them in the traditional way that they were eaten, like fermenting them, or, you know, through nixtamalization, something like that sort of can detoxify these things a bit more. and make their nutrients a bit more available. And then just make meat the center of your meal. Just try to eat a lot more meat and a lot more fat. Use butter. Cook with tallow, and get fatty cuts of meat. Get like brisket and chuck steak, and try to get fatty ground beef. Like I get like 50-50 ground beef from my butcher, because that's about 70% calories from fat, and that's sort of what I shoot for at that range.
So good stuff, by the way. Great stuff, by the way. What
Thanks.
about peas? What if I grow my own plants and butter? Because your boy Ben Azadi talked about real butter and fake butter, so I'm assuming you're talking about the real butter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, real butter. Yeah. So if you grow it in your own garden, you're still going to have 10,000 times more of these toxins naturally occurring in the plants, right?
Oh, yeah, you
Yeah.
can't wait.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing, because that research we saw, in from Bruce Ames back in the 80s, right? We showed that the plants themselves have 10,000 times more toxins and pesticides naturally occurring than the pesticides we spray on them. So, yes, if you grow it in your own garden and you're not spraying it with chemicals, yeah, that's better. But the plant itself is harmful. Peas, it depends on the kind of pea, but again, that's a seed, right? That's a seed, that's a legume, that's a bean, but yeah, they'd be sort of better than other things. Like you don't have to sugar snap peas and things like that. Again, it has a bit of sweetness to it, has a bit of sugar. Generally, things that have a bit of sweetness to it and sugar to it are less toxic, because it's thought that we recognize that fructose as like the sweetest of the carbohydrates, because we recognize that as something that we could eat safely, that wasn't going to kill us that day if we ate it. Now, it doesn't mean that it's completely devoid of toxins, and again, the sugar is not great for you, and the fiber is not good for you, but it's not going to kill you that day, so you can survive on it, right? But even if you're just eating meat, right, and you're eating like a fatty steak, that's like the best you can do. Big, fatty, awesome grass-fed steak, right? Grain finished just underneath, right? Then chicken breast, lean chicken breast, right? So it's good. It's good for you. It has benefits for you. So it's better than zero, right? So it's giving you a bonus, but it doesn't have much of fat. It doesn't have a lot of fat. It doesn't have a lot of the nutrients. It doesn't have the same amount of nutrition as like a big steak would, which is why steak tastes a lot better than a dry ass chicken breast, right? And so it's so the chicken breast is good, but it's not as good as a steak, so it's not optimal. So there's still that disparity. There's still a big gap. And so, sugar snap peas or whatever, they're going to be down here. Maybe they're slightly negative, or maybe they're just neutral, right? But there's still going to be that big of a gap between that and the steak. So I try to go for optimal. I want my body to work as well as it possibly can at all times, because I love feeling my best. I don't feel a little bit better. I don't feel a lot better. I feel 1,000 times better than I've ever felt in my entire life, even as a professional athlete training for 8 hours a day. And I feel better now at 43 than I did at 27 working out for 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Because of how I eat. I've never felt better, except for about 5 years of my life, between 20 and 25, that I did this inadvertently, because all I was doing was skipping out on plants. And I've never felt better in my entire life. I honestly, I remember thinking at the time, I don't think that anybody on earth could have been in better shape than me, because I don't see how they could have been, because I was at a dead sprint for 6 to 8 hours a day, every single day. And I got to the point I could not get tired. I couldn't wear myself out. And I was like, I'm literally sprinting the equivalent of marathons in my training, and just sprinting, just dead sprint the whole time. I can't wear myself out. And I was actually thinking, I was like, I should enter a marathon, because I'm never going to be as fit as this again in my entire life. And I just think that I could just sprint the whole damn thing and just win it on my first go, and just get in the newspaper or something like that. But the thought of running a marathon just honestly just bored me to tears. And so I was just like, oh, all right, well, I'm not gonna go out of my way to do it. I was just like, well, if I see something in the news or something like that, like a Seattle marathon, I'll go run it. But this was before the internet and things like that. So like it wasn't as easy to look that stuff up. So, but I regret it. I absolutely regret it. I remember thinking at the time, like, I'm going to regret this if I don't do this. And I don't actually timestamp just how insanely fit I am. But I felt amazing. And then when I was 38, and I was doing humanitarian work in Bangladesh. I was volunteering in refugee camps there in southern Bangladesh, helping the survivors of a. Sorry.
I said, shout out Bangladesh.
Yeah, yeah, and I was in the refugee camps there helping the survivors of a genocide in Burma. So like the Burmese government killed like 200,000 people in a month in September of 2017, the Rohingya, and so about a million people fled into southern Bangladesh to escape that, and there wasn't really enough people to help because it was, first of all, it's very, very dangerous, and it wasn't one of the big highly publicized humanitarian disasters. It was just a real one, and so it wasn't like a sexy one like Nepal or something like that. It was just a tragic situation, and but also it was just very, very dangerous because ISIS was very aggressive at the time. They're very active in Bangladesh at the time, and they were attacking hotels and places that foreign workers were. And they blew up a hotel just because there was one American staying there, and all that stuff. So it was pretty crazy. And I was in refugee camps there and trying to help as much as I could. And when I got back, like I was not in shape. I hadn't done anything in months, and really hadn't played a full season of rugby in probably 3 years at that point. But I then went back on carnivore. That's when I figured it out, and I just felt so amazing that after 2 weeks, I was still like overweight. I still had extra fat on me. But I lost 23 pounds in 10 days just by stopping vegetables. So I wasn't eating carbs, I wasn't eating sugar, I wasn't drinking. I was just eating a buttload of kale, broccoli, and spinach, and just like a little bit of lean meat because I was trying to trim down. I was trying to get back into shape because I wanted to play rugby. And I just wasn't feeling great, and I wasn't losing weight, and I was trying to work out, but it just wasn't feeling good. And I was like, all right, well, I need to really get into shape before I'm able to do something. And then when I went carnivore, I just went, right, that's it. I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get really stupid things. And I just ditched the kale, the spinach, and the broccoli, and I just started eating a lot more meat. I started focusing on the fat as well. So I probably quintupled my calories per day, and I lost 23 pounds in 10 days. And then I stayed the exact same weight, but because I was working out so much, I just started shredding fat and stacking on muscle. I just completely offset the fat I was losing with the muscle I was gaining. And so I was looking in the mirror, like every few weeks I'd take a picture, and I was just like, I was almost didn't recognize myself. It was such a dramatic difference in how I looked and how I felt. And after 2 weeks of that, I'm like, I feel great. I'm going to play some rugby. And I went out, and I was just at a dead sprint, running up and down the field, and felt great. Even though I'm 38 years old, hadn't played a full season in 3 years, and was very much out of shape. I felt amazing. And so, I was back there playing, and with the Seattle Seawolves, that was the first year that they went professional. And that was a team I played with for, years, really, since I was a teenager. And, I felt absolutely amazing. So then at 38, completely out of shape, just back from refugee camps, overweight, I felt better then than 10 years earlier when I was playing in the Super League in San Diego and getting ready for the 2007 World Cup. I felt amazing. And so this diet is not just a diet. It's a way of life, and it is life, because it is how we are designed to live and be. And so when you start eating this way and you get all that garbage out of your system, you start running properly, you literally feel like a different breed of human. And in a lot of ways you are, because your body is working in ways that other people simply aren't. And you will feel better than you ever have in your entire life. I can guarantee you that.
Very interesting stuff. I asked about the peas because, Jamaicans, we're infamous for rice and peas. So
Mm.
that's why I ask about it. And my grandmother, oh my goodness, does that lady love her garden? Oh,
Yeah.
she'll come in, oh my goodness, with these
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables that she's growing with a big old smile from ear to ear about how she just grew this in her backyard and she's gonna make it right now, or she gotta get on the phone and tell her how big this vegetable or fruit is that's homegrown. But I think she's defied according to the information that you're giving me, I think she has defied the odds. She's now 98 years old, and she is far healthier than a lot of people in their
Yeah.
60s. Her diet mainly consists of coffee, tea, soup. She doesn't, when she does eat, it is small doses she eats till she's content, not till she's full. So, and I've she eats later in the day, and she doesn't eat in big doses. When she does eat meat, it's like, a little slab off the side. But one of the issues she does have is she doesn't have enough circulation in her hands. She always complains about the lack of strength in her hands. So if I tell her maybe to, take her up taking some steak, and some beef and some lean meats, would she gain some strength? Do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And fatty meats, especially. And that's especially important for her brain as she ages. When you're Alzheimer's is now thought of as type 3 diabetes, and that's because you get insulin resistance to your brain as well. And so when you're eating a bunch of carbs, you get insulin resistance. And so now energy can't cross into your brain either, and you start to slow down, and the brain actually starts to shrink. And we call this age-related degeneration of the brain. And we think of that as normal just because we see it so often, but it is not normal. That does not have to happen. Your brain does not have to shrink as you age. Um, and so if you stop eating carbohydrates and you start eating more fatty meat and or exclusively fatty meat, then you switch over, you start using ketones, and your brain starts running almost exclusively on ketones. There's parts of your brain that still run on glucose, the rest of it runs on ketones.
What
And so it doesn't, yeah.
what are some of the essential fatty meats that you're referring to?
Well, just any meat that has fat on it. So I mean, beef, chicken, pork, fish. Add butter to that. You can have eggs are great. Eggs are with the white is 60% calories from fat. Just the yolk is 80% calories from fat. That's perfect. And so if someone wants to increase their fat, just egg yolks are a really good option for that. Even bacon, as long as it's not cured with sugar and things like that, is totally fine. Or pork bellies and things like that. And so, but just going off of the carbohydrates, your brain will start running on ketones, and it doesn't need insulin to cross into the brain. It just goes readily. So they wake up and their minds work much better. Very like within a day or two, they start working a lot better. In fact, there was a study looking at putting Alzheimer's patients that were in the hospital with Alzheimer's, put them on a ketogenic diet, like a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, and they found that that was a better treatment for Alzheimer's than every medication ever trialed. Right, so that makes a big difference into your brain. And when ketones cross into your brain, they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they reconstitute into fatty acids, and that actually is what builds the structures of your brain. And so if you're not getting enough fat, if you're not getting enough animal meat and protein and fat and cholesterol, your brain doesn't have all the materials it needs to maintain its structure. And again, like B12 and things like that. Now, your grandma is a perfect example of someone living a very, very clean, good life. She's growing her own food. She's eating whole food. She's not eating processed garbage. She's not, drinking down sodas and a bunch of sugary stuff. So, she's going to be doing much better. And that's what I was saying. You can eat the way you're eating and just have some meat and just eat some whole foods and do much better than everyone else. And you'll live longer than other people generally. But you also got to realize that genetically humans are designed to live 120 years on average, meaning that if you yeah. So based on our telomeres, so telomeres are sort of caps on the end of your chromosomes, and we can sort of tell by how long those are, how long we'll live. And this is why people say like working out, exercise, sorts of things that will add length to your telomere, so that literally adds years to your life. And so based on the length of our telomeres, I was taught in genetics 20 years ago that humans are designed to live 120 years on average, meaning that if you just don't mess up, you should make it to 120 years without doing anything special. And if you do things special, you can live longer than that, right? So, yes, I think your grandma would benefit greatly from that. There was a gentleman who's a patient of a friend of mine who's a doctor down here, and she deals with older patients, geriatrics patients. And she said that there was this gentleman who was 86 years old, And he was still with it, but he couldn't cope at home. He wasn't able to survive really. He wasn't able to take care of himself. And so he had to check himself into a nursing home. And basically, he checked himself in there to die. He wasn't able to take care of himself. He's just, okay, this is it. This is the end. I'm just going to be here until I die. And his sort of last ditch attempt at life was going carnivore at 86 years old in a nursing home, dying. He went carnivore. In 2 months, he was back living at home. He's going to the gym 3 days a week, and he's swimming twice a week. And he's off all of his medications. All right. So that is how powerful this is. And especially for people in the extremes of age, for kids and for elderly, this is the most important thing that they can ever do in their life. Kids, because this is how they develop. And we haven't developed to our genetic potential. None of us have developed to our genetic potential. People born before the agricultural revolution, their brains were on average 11% smaller than or larger than they are now. So our brains have shrunk by over 10% in the last 10,000 years, right? We're shorter now. On average, American, an adult male man is 5'8" on average. Back when we were hunting mammoths, on average 6'2" to 6'4" in some areas, average, right? The Maasai in Africa, they just eat meat, drink blood, drink milk. They don't eat plants. They're on average 6'3", 6'4", big, tall, lean bastards. You see some of these guys; they're athletic as hell, and these guys fight lions with sticks, and they win. Right?
That's crazy.
That's dudes, right? And
Africans have very good genes, though. I will admit.
Sorry.
I said Africans have very good genes. I will admit.
Well, 100%. But the thing is, though, is that you see this in other areas too. Like, I mean, think about China, right? The Chinese are pretty short. I think it's on average about 5'6" right now, adult male height in China. You go back to the Qin dynasty and you look at the soldiers that were there that formed China in the first place. They were on average 6'3". You go back to Mongolia, Mongolians, I think they're on average 6'4", or sorry, 5'4", 5'6", or something like that now. Back in Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde, they were on average 6'2", 6'4". Big bastards. And they were fighting all these Chinese peasants armies and things like that. And there were accounts of them, like the Chinese trying to hack at them. They weren't even strong enough to pierce their armor with their weapons. And the Mongolians were just cleaving these suckers in half because they were just so big and so strong. They ate horse meat, they drank horse blood and fermented horse milk. They were carnivores. They only ate meat, and they were big as hell, strong as an ox. They would go 5 days without eating. They wouldn't have to stop 3 times a day to cook and feed the troops. They just went. They had no cook fires. So all the other generals and all the other countries were like, we don't know where the hell these people are, because normally you see this big army come, oh, they're coming, and they're coming, and they're coming. It was just like everything's fine, and then bam, they're on you, right? And they took over the largest contiguous empire that has ever existed, right? Is most of Asia, most of Europe. Was Russia now? That used to be part of the Mongol Empire, right? And most of China. It was just, they were so dominant, and they just ate meat. They were big bastards. Now they're not. Now they're on average a lot shorter. But the guys who live out in the country and just still eat meat, they're still on average 6'4". Some of these guys are pushing 7 feet, And so that's what our genetic potential is. The Native Americans, they were tall. They were very tall, big, muscular guys, right? And again, on average, very, very tall, well above 6 feet. And again, these guys were just eating buffalo. They're just eating tons and tons and tons of buffalo. There was a meeting between then President Thomas Jefferson and someone, I think they were coming down from the Great Lakes. And Jefferson, his own account of this was that these Native American guys, they were giants. Jefferson was 6'2", right? So he was one of the taller presidents. And he was saying these guys towered above him. These guys were giants. They were estimates were they were like 6'9", 6'10". They were big guys, right? So that's how important this is when you're eating and you're developing. It is so important for kids because you can't develop twice, right? The height that we're all ever going to be, right? But you start feeding your kids, you get them on this early on, you get, their mother to just eat this way while she's pregnant and breastfeeding. Those kids are going to be much bigger. Their brains are going to be much bigger. Their bones are going to be bigger. They're going to be stronger. Their muscles are going to be more developed. Their nervous system is going to be more developed. They're going to be more athletic. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be faster, and they're going to be more intelligent. And then when you're an adult, then it matters because you have to maintain this. You have to optimize this. You have this body, and you only got one, and that's it. It's gone after that. And so you need to maintain this thing like you would a Ferrari. You need to this is a precision machine, and it will run like a Ferrari if you let it. But if you put diesel into a gas engine, you're going to kill the engine, right? Put a bunch of shitty ethanol fuel into that thing, few tanks, may not notice the difference, but after 10 years of that, you're going to start destroying that engine, right? So this is something that matters. And when you get to extremes of age, like your grandmother or my grandparents, who ate bacon and eggs every single morning, and they died at home, fully intact mentally in their mid-90s, and they actually they passed away from cancer and probably from malpractice as well. And I don't think they should have died when they did, but they ate eggs and bacon every day, and they ate other stuff too, but they ate whole foods. But even dying in your 90s is 25 years too early, and we actually have accounts of the Native Americans who were just eating meat, and they were saying it was just like, yeah, this guy's 115, that guy's 118, that guy's 122. The longest lived Native American was Chief White Wolf, and he was born in like the late 1700s, died in the early 1900s, or so he claims.
Get out of town. Get out of town.
Yeah, well, so 136 is what he said. 136, 137, something like that. But that's the thing. People don't believe it because they're like, that just sounds too far fetched. But again, we are designed to live an average of 120 years, right? So that's not that far fetched. When you're saying someone's going to 115, 120 or something like that, that's what we're supposed to make it to if you're just living biologically, right? And so if you're eating what you're evolved to eat, you'll live out your genetic potential, right? And our genetic potential is 120 years. We even see this in like ancient Greek histories. So Herodotus is the father of ancient Greek of just history, and he chronicled an account between the emissary from Persia, the Persian Empire, down to the king of Ethiopia in Africa. And the king of Ethiopia asked this guy, said, okay, what does your emperor eat and how long do your people normally live? And the guy from Persia said, described wheat and growing wheat and making bread, and said, we eat bread and we eat wheat, and our people would normally live around 70 years. And the king of Ethiopia just laughed at him and just said, well, if you guys just eat dirt, no wonder you live such short lives. We just eat boiled meat, and we only drink the milk of our cattle. And our people would live 120 years, sometimes much more than that. And again, that looks like he's just full of it. He's just bragging. 120 years on the nose. That's what he said. We live about 120 years. That's exactly how long you're supposed to live. So so I don't actually disbelieve these accounts.
So we're supposed to be living as long as people in the Bible, man. Lord have mercy. We're really.
Well, I don't know if we're gonna get like Methuselah or anything like that, but even in the Bible, there's account that says people that the normal span of human life is 120 years. 120. It keeps coming back, and there's so many historical records of 120, 120, 120, 120. And now we know as geneticists, on average, we're supposed to live 120. So people that were actually living a normal amount of time, could count, and they just paid attention to this.
I want to live 120 if I'm coherent and I can walk and I can move around.
Well, but that's the thing. That's the idea. Is that you're not just sitting in a nursing home turning to dust for 40 years, right? These are Stone Age nomads with a pack on their back, following the buffalo herds day in and day out, right? So there is no nursing home. They don't have that option. So compos mentis, brain working, body working. So you're an active, fit, healthy adult until you drop dead at 125 or 130. And with what we're figuring out now, people like David Sinclair from Harvard has been doing some crazy stuff with reversing aging, things like that. We might might hit a point where we can actually just keep going and keep going and keep going, which is, invest in compound interest now, because that'll pay off in 60 years, but yeah.
I just wanted to make it to 100, but now I have a goal to make it to 138. Why stop? Let's get to 140 now. Now that I know that it's actually possible. My
Yeah.
my final question is, if you could only practice 5 health practices, what would they be?
Well, first and foremost would be diet. I think that's the most important thing. I think everything else is a function of our diet. Our body works better or worse on that. The amount that we can exercise, the amount that we can do, all depends on our diet. And even if we work out the same amount, you'll get more out of that workout and recover better as long if your diet is better. So I think diet is a number one most important thing we can do. I think the second most important is exercise, being physically active, lifting weights, playing sports, doing things. We are designed to move. We are designed to fight. We are designed to hunt. We are designed to be physically dominant. We're not actually small, helpless, defenseless creatures. I mean, think about these ancestors that were 6'5", 6'6", 7 feet tall, wrestling down mammoths and killing them. They had to be big, strong, physically dominant animals. And we are designed for that. And we are more healthy when we do that. And there's a lot of data for that. If you people who lift weights, they can increase their testosterone and growth hormone. They can lengthen their telomeres that we talked about earlier, and you can actually live longer, healthier life. As people age, they get what's called sarcopenia, which is a wasting of the muscles. That is directly related to lifespan. So the thinner and more frail you get, the sooner you're going to die. And so proper diet, exercise is what holds that off and what keeps you strong. Other than that, I think you just try to optimize things. You try to get good sleep. You try to optimize your sleep. That's very important. A lot of your hormones are kicked off in a circadian rhythm where they're triggered by when you go to sleep and when you wake up. If you go to sleep at a different time every night, you will mess up your hormones. If you're going to sleep at the same time every night, 2 hours if you go to sleep is your biggest hit of growth hormone, and that your pituitary will kick off a massive dose of growth hormone that helps you heal and repair overnight, and then you get kicks of that for every hour. And that's also why you don't eat carbs, right? Because carbohydrates raise insulin. Insulin blocks the secretion of growth hormone and the action of growth hormone. And growth hormone is one of our most important hormones for health and longevity and muscle building. I mean, this is why people like the Liver King and bodybuilders and things like that just super high dose this stuff. It's good for you. You don't need to take it. You will optimize it with your diet, with exercise. It increases growth hormone by lifting weights. If you're doing just a bunch of running all the time, a bunch of cardio, it actually lowers testosterone, lowers growth hormone, increases cortisol. Lifting weights does the opposite. Sprinting does the opposite. And then sleep also benefits that. So you're sleeping at the right time. You're going to be optimizing your growth hormone and your testosterone and estrogen for women. Whereas if you go to sleep two hours after your body wants you to be asleep, you'll miss that growth hormone hit and you won't get it. It doesn't happen 2 hours after that. You just don't get it that night. So you've missed your medicine that day, and that adds up. And so if you're not getting good quality sleep, you're not gonna optimize your hormones. You're not going to be as healthy as you could be. They've done studies in rats where they just sort of nudge them and wake them up when their brain goes into REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, and just wake them up. So they get all the other phases of sleep, but they just don't get REM sleep. They started getting erratic, started getting crazy, started being neurotic and freaking out. And after 2 weeks, they all died. We're all getting the same number of hours of sleep. They just weren't getting that sleep cycle. So you really do need high quality sleep. You need to be able to get undisturbed sleep, using a sleep mask, using, blue blocking glasses, things like that in the late evening if you need to, and just optimizing your sleep, however you need to do that. I wear a sleep mask. That has night and day changed my quality of sleep, but also being carnivore, that's revolutionized the way I slept. I have terrible sleep. So that's major one there. Getting outside is really important. There's more and more research with cold therapy, like taking cold showers in the morning, doing cold plunges and things like that. I think those are quite beneficial. They suck, but I always felt better after I did ice baths and when I played sports, even though I hated them. And there is research that it actually promotes healthy hormones and optimizes testosterone growth hormone and also thyroid hormone. And when you get to the point where you're like shivering cold, your brown fat cells will start actually producing about 50% more thyroid hormone. So this ramps up your metabolism because it's trying to keep you warm, trying to burn energy, to burn calories to get heat, right? And so you can ramp up your metabolism that way. And just getting outside, getting in the sun. People are very scared of the sun. They think, oh, we're going to get cancer, this, that, and the other. As hours of sun exposure has gone down over the last century, skin cancer and melanomas have gone up. Again, it's an inverse relationship between that. We were designed to be in the sun. We've been in the sun the entire existence of humanity. The reason that we're getting more problems and burns and all that sort of stuff is because we're eating plants. And there's a lot of those plants, a lot of those fructose are, again, light sensitive. They make you sensitive to light. They make you burn easier, and you're getting burned more and you're getting more damage. That's one of the main defenses that plants have, is making you sensitive, or making animals in general sensitive to UV light, so that they just get scorched. They eat these plants and their face just gets burnt up, and any exposed skin gets burnt up. There's a thing called celery dermatitis, where people that pick celery or handle celery or eat a lot of celery, they get horribly sensitive to sunlight and they burn terribly. And so they have to wear hats, sunscreen, and gloves and long sleeve shirts all the time, or they just get scorched, right? That's why you don't see too many tan vegans, right? Because they just die. They just turn to dust, And so it's something that we've been told to fear, but the sun is actually really good for us. There's new research that just came out that showed that if you just get 30 minutes of sun exposure, like, just with your shirt off or in a bathing suit, if you're a girl, 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week, that dramatically increases testosterone for men and estrogen in women. So this again can optimize your hormones as well. So just trying to be as natural as possible, getting outside, getting in the sun, cold exposure, and optimizing your sleep. I think those are things that people can do and have people generally have quite good control over in their day-to-day life. People are busy, I understand that, but it is something that you can affect. And then just the number one and number two is just eating right, and doing exercise, doing heavy physical exertion, to the degree that you can, and then just building up from there. And you will feel better and better and better as you go. And just doing all of those things together, if you can, I mean, it will just absolutely change your life.
Thank you so much for this.
No
Final
problem.
comment. I slept well as a kid. I used to go to bed religiously. My parents said 10. I usually went to bed at around 9, 10 when I was younger. When you're younger, you need about like 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And my friends, they're like, yeah, it was up to 3 a.m. yesterday. I'm like, I was in bed 9, 10. I don't know how you guys do it. And I end up growing to 6, 7. I don't know if that's a coincidence there, but that's something I like to brag about. I went to bed on time when I was younger. My parents made sure of it. And I think as a kid, I just naturally wanted to go to bed earlier. Um, due to what you said, my future baby mother will be because I want to raise an athlete, right? So
Mhm.
she will be having a lot of lean meats, a lot of
Yeah.
fatty meats during the pregnancy.
Yeah,
Hopefully
absolutely.
with that. Is breast milk still the best way to feed the child, or would you go with
Oh
almond milk
yeah.
formula?
Oh
Breast
God, no. Oh no. Yeah, 100% breast milk. But also, it does matter what the mother's eating when she's making breast milk. It doesn't just, it doesn't just churn out like a perfect, product, just because it's breast milk. You know, it does take a lot from the mother, a lot of nutrients and things like that. And it is very draining. It's very, very energy demanding. But at the same time, it's you nature's not going to allow you to strip your body of every essential nutrient to give to the baby, because if you die, then the baby dies too, right?
milk.
So when nature, like a baby dying but the mother surviving, is better, because then the mother can have more babies, right? That's just how biology works. And so you actually see that. So there's been a number of cases, actually more and more recently. I hate to see it, but you see this more in the news, that vegan mothers who are breastfeeding, their kids are dying from the breast milk, right? So they're not getting enough nutrients. and they're too deficient, and maybe there's stuff getting in there as well that isn't as good, because this is, these different toxins that your body can't process properly. Some of that's getting into the milk as well, and so that's going to get to your kid. So yes, breast milk is 100% best. I would never ever drink any sort of fake milk like almond milk, or I mean, again, almonds have cyanide, and you also have to add like a ton of sugar to it, right, to make that stuff palatable. Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, it has.
we're better off drinking dairy milk.
I mean, dairy is better than almond milk or any other fake milk. Um, but I think it has enough lactose and carbs to take you out of your proper metabolic state. So because it's going to raise your insulin, and that's gonna screw up your metabolism. So I love milk. I absolutely love milk, but I don't drink it very often. I actually drink very, very rarely, maybe once a year, because it has enough lactose, and I try to limit it. Maybe I have a glass or something like that. But it is something that can spike your insulin and screw your metabolism up for the rest of the day. And so I tend to avoid it for that. And I certainly wouldn't eat any or drink any plant milks, the oat milks, almond milks, soy milks, any of that sort of stuff is going to be highly toxic. Yeah, if you're going to do milk, just do milk.
We've been told that that's healthier, man. I don't know what to
Yeah.
believe anymore, man. I don't even know if the sky's blue anymore, man.
Well, but you're told that by people trying to sell you almond milk and oat milk. Like, this is a superfood, buy it from me. You know, that that show Game Changers, right? They're like, oh my God, look at all these vegan athletes and things like that. Well, first of all, they excluded out, I think it's 6 athletes that started doing vegan, and then after a few months are like, this sucks. I'm eating meat. I feel like crap, and so they went back to it. So they didn't include those. And then a lot of these guys actually went back to eating meat after it was filmed. A lot of these guys actually had worse performances, and their whole career, most of these guys were eating meat the whole time. They stopped. They went vegetarian for like a few months. And like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And it was like, okay, did you? And it performed, and they didn't actually perform better when they switched over, but they like pretended like they did. And so it was, but the thing is too, is that like that whole thing was just a big commercial. Like they weren't actually trying to help the world. James Cameron was the executive producer of that. So he made Terminator, Avatar, things like that. He owned $140 million worth of a pea protein company, right? And so he made this thing saying, don't eat meat, don't eat meat. Okay, where are you going to get your protein? Oh, well, I just happen to have this pea protein that works great. Why don't you get some of that? What I mean? This is just a scam. That was just a giant commercial. And it was verifiably false in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We have a lot of industry research. We have a lot of people being paid to tell us to eat certain things, but what we've been told to eat, they've been telling us, this is healthy, this is healthy, this is healthy, has made us fat, sick, and chronically ill and dying young. In the last 40 years, obesity rates have tripled, heart disease tripled, stroke rate tripled, cancer rates tripled, type 2 diabetes gone up by a factor of 6, autoimmune diseases by more than that, autism by more than that, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. These things, people didn't normally die in a nursing home. They usually died at home. Now just everyone's getting dementia, everyone's getting Alzheimer's. Even the medications we're giving them can cause these things. There is different statins that cross the blood-brain barrier and stop your brain from making cholesterol. And this can actually give people dementia and reversible dementia, because they take them off this drug, and in 6 weeks their brain works again. And they put them back on the drug, and now they've got dementia again. Well, they don't have dementia. They're being poisoned. And so, it's we're being sold something, but what we're being sold is actually extremely harmful to us. And that's why we have to do our own research, and we have to look at it. I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell. I work in neurosurgery. That's my day job. I get paid way more to just do my job. I've actually taken 6 months off from the hospital just to focus on other projects, because it's just too much time commitment. I don't have the time to do all these things, but I really care about them, and I think they're very, very important. And so I'm not working for 6 months so that I can do this, and I can try to get these projects done and speak at conferences and be involved in different projects for, like, documentaries on proper nutrition, trying to combat get some Netflix documentaries out there that go counter to the whole, game changers nonsense that they put out there to try to undo the damage that these guys have caused and try to get people healthy again. So, I'm, I and people like Dr. Sean Baker and things like that, we've given up, a lot in order to do this because we actually care about it. So I'm not, I don't have anything to sell you guys. I'm not just like secretly own like a massive cattle yard that I'm just trying to get rid of or something like that. Like I'm actually losing money by doing this because I really care about it. And so I think that's what you need to look at is just look at the evidence. You don't have to take my word for it. My videos, I try to put studies and resources and references in there that I'm getting this stuff from. And if something's my opinion, I think this is a conclusion I've drawn, I tell you. And if something's from a study, I'll tell you that and I'll link it. I'll put it in the description. And so people can find this stuff. And so you listen to my arguments, listen to their arguments, check my resources, check their resources, and see what you think. Check who's paid for their resources first, because most of it's going to be the sugar companies, the drug companies. If they disclose that, sometimes they don't. And so, then see what you believe and then just try it for yourself. You go 30 days just eating meat, you will be a different person and you will feel better than you ever have in your entire life. If you're eating enough and you're eating enough fatty meat and you're drinking enough water and you really exclude everything else, you will feel like a superhero. And, that's really the most important evidence is how you feel. People get that guy who was in a nursing home, he's out of a nursing home, he's working out 3 days a week, swimming twice a week. That's what matters. It doesn't matter what a study says. Well, actually, this study shows that eating more fiber is going to be good. Okay, well, you know what? He was doing that and it didn't work. It had him in a nursing home. Now he's not doing that and he's back home living independently and going to the gym. And that's the only thing that matters is actual results. Physicist Richard Feynman said, it doesn't matter how brilliant your theory is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. And when people are putting this to the test and they're doing this with their own body and putting their own life on the line, they're showing that those people are wrong. And you can do it too. I've done it. I've been doing it for 23 years now. And I've been pure on it. I've never felt better in my entire life. And so whether or not other people do this is I don't mind. I don't have a problem with anyone making their own decisions. I'm very libertarian in that regard. I want people to be able to make their own decisions, but I want them to have both sides of the story. I want them to have the right information so that they can make an informed decision. And if someone wants to smoke, they want to drink, they want to eat carrots for some odd reason, fine. But just understand what these things are doing to you, and understand that your life could be better and you could feel like a different breed of human and live a lot longer, live a lot healthier, and come off medications if you're on them.
My final two comments. It seems like I like to wear shades for fashion, but it seems like it does a lot to block the blue UV rays and things of that nature. I might wear them before I go to sleep because I don't have a night mask. It seems like that's beneficial in that regard. And last but not least, it is my birthday, guys. Yes, I decided to do a podcast on my birthday, and he's way overseas. It's tomorrow where he's at, so I'm doing this for y'all. I sincerely appreciate every single one of you. God bless you all. This has been an absolutely eye-opening experience. I'm just thinking about just eating like 4 pounds of meat now, like every single day. And I sincerely appreciate you for this, man. You're a godsend. You're doing God's work, and neurosurgeons are paid handsomely, guys. They're paid handsomely. They're paid handsomely. He's taking time off to make sure to educate the world. That's something that is truly admirable.
Well, thanks, man. Happy birthday. That's I didn't know it was your birthday. That's awesome that you're doing this. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on. It was great to speak to you and your listeners, and hopefully people get a bit interested and start asking questions and seeing if it's right for them.
Make sure to go check him out. If you're here already, subscribe. This probably won't come out on my birthday, but man, I'm doing this for my birthday. Just subscribe, right? I mean, least you can do. Least you can do.